Good morning and welcome to the Patriot Radio News Hour. This is your substitute teacher, Glenn Biddle. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. You found economics and history with attitude. I've added that history in there because, as you know, I'm a history teacher, and there's nothing better than learning a little bit of history while Joe's away. He must be having a great vacation because no one's heard from him. He's having a ball, so that's great. Well, we hear all the stories when he gets back on Wednesday. So we hope this finds you well on this mid-July Monday. Now, depending on how you're paid, you could have been paid on Friday or you could have been paid today. And if you were paid on Friday, that's a good thing because, remember, that was the supposedly Friday the 13th, the unlucky day, but we dealt with that. We figured out that unlucky Friday the 13th is just a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we debunked all that with the history that I told you about. But today, if you got paid today on a Monday, well, that makes Monday just a little bit better. So that's okay. I hope you had a great weekend. Sometimes on the weekend you just want to check out and not listen to any news, and that's kind of what I did this weekend. I went shooting on Saturday at the range, had a great time, went to the beach yesterday with my son, and of course there was a gentleman and his son next to us at the beach yesterday, and they were huddled under their umbrella, and they were looking at their cell phone. It's like, hey, you guys watching the World Cup? And we're like, yeah, it's great. I'm like, well, keep us informed, tell us what's going on. So they kept us, giving us the play-by-play, and boy, France pulled it out. And have you seen the Croatian president? What a great leader. She is multilingual, very well educated. She was such a great sport. She was up there hugging Macron. And did you notice some of the pictures? It was raining, and Putin is underneath an umbrella, but those two were out in the rain just getting wet. And what a class act that was. So they're getting France is getting the trophy. And we talked Friday about how much gold is actually in that trophy. I think it was like 10.8 pounds. It was $150,000. We talked about that of gold value in that trophy. That's really, really neat. Now, if you missed Friday's show, it was such a hoot. We had the Quotable Quotes game show. We had Jason on from the Colorado show, and Ramon was tearing it up. He knows the serial killers. We had a couple quotes for that, and Ramon was on that. He's getting some great parting gifts. I'm going to send those out to him tomorrow. Okay, so if you missed that, go to the podcast and check it out. It's absolutely great. Okay, so also for streaming in Colorado, make sure you're listening to shoutcast.com. Go to shoutcast.com and then click on or search for the American Freedom Network, and you can listen to the Colorado show. Those guys, Jason and Brian, are just doing a great job with that, and it's really, really a great program. Now, what a busy weekend. Well, France won the World Cup, and whatever happened to winning a great sporting event and celebrating and not burning half your country down? I don't get it. I don't understand that. You see all the major rioting that took place. On Friday, I believe the Department of Justice indicted 12 Russian nationals for hacking the DNC server. Well, what timing that was. Do you think there might have been a summit coming up on Monday between us and Russia? I think the deep state has everything out for Trump that they can possibly do. That couldn't have waited a week or so. It's unbelievable. And obviously, the whole Seth Rich story has just been buried, that he possibly had something to do with it. But you're never going to get that in the mainstream news. There was the Chicago police shooting, and they released the body cam footage. I don't know if you've taken a look at that, but they actually have a slow-motion version of it. And you can actually see when the guy lifts his shirt, there's a pistol and a magazine in his waistband, and Chicago is just blown up over that. And the police usually don't release body cam images like that very quickly unless they know they're right. And I think they're trying to diffuse a lot of this by saying, look, this guy was armed, and the police had to do what they had to do. Also, remember we talked last week about the Peter Strzok hearings and how the Democratic representative that said Strzok should get a Purple Heart. Well, he has apologized all over himself about that, and he's trying to walk that back. But I think it's a bit too late because the veterans are after him on that, and I think the damage is done. So that's something that you need to really think before you speak when you do something like that. Okay, now on the website today, we have the Century, America's Time. We're going to play a couple clips in the second segment on that. This is about the Great Depression, and it's really going to be interesting. I think you're going to like that. We also have the Ray Dalio article on universal basic income. I know Joe would have covered that if he was here. I didn't have time last week, but that's on the website. But just a real quick down and dirty on that. The plan is to give everybody $12,000 of universal basic income, and they're claiming that it would cost about $3.8 trillion. And we just throw this number around now, just $3.8 trillion. It used to be billion was a big deal, a million was a big deal, but now we're just throwing trillions out like they're a big deal. Well, they are a big deal, and they add up. And you go to the debt clock on the website, you can see how they add up. So those two things are on the website today, so definitely want to take a look at that. Now, the agenda today. So we're going to cover more on the Great Depression and how bad some of the people actually had it, what diversions they had to forget about the troubles they were going through. And one of those was diversions with the radio. And if you're listening to the radio right now, or if you're listening to the podcast, back during the Great Depression, obviously no TV, so people would just sit around their living room and they would look at the radio and listen to it. And remember, as I always say, radio is theater of the mind. You can imagine so many things when you're hearing the programs that are coming out. Okay, and then we're also going to hear about how bank runs destroyed confidence in the banking system and how it actually destroyed people as well. And I've been trying to tell the audience here about how I hook kids into learning, and there's a couple ways I can do this. So how I hook kids on a certain topic, it depends on the historical event. Like, say I want to teach something back in history. So what I'll do is I'll tie it to a present topic, and then I'll bring in the historical event. Or if I want to talk a present topic, I'll talk about the historical event and then relate it to the present. I did that last week with the Depression and the housing crisis of 2008, and it does work. It works on kids. It works on adults. It's perfect, okay? Let's take a look at our markets. A little mixed markets today, nothing terribly crazy. The S&P is down 5, the NASDAQ's down 16, Dow Jones is down 8, the Nikkei, well, we'll cover markets when we get back. That segment went really quick. We'll talk about markets in the special on the flip side, so stay tuned. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour. We're going to talk prepping also. And welcome back, Patriot Radio News Hour. Ramon brought us back into the London Symphony Orchestra. That's theme music there from Zero Dark 30. That's the scene where the SEALs are getting on board the Blackhawks, and they're going into the Bin Laden compound to kill him and bring him back. That's great music. Just to look at our markets again, nothing really going crazy on the markets. The only thing that was really notable is the Nikkei is up 409 points. If we take a look at commodities, oil is down $2.80. Boy, that would take a week to show up on the pumps, but if it was up $2.80, it would be on there today. Gold is down $1.10 at $12.40.10, and silver is down 2 cents at $15.79. Anytime silver's that low is a great buying opportunity in my book. And I'm a silver guy. I'm a silverite, as they used to call them back in the past. Today's special, we have $20 Liberties or St. Gaudens, your choice, at $1,330 a coin. Or if you want to buy 10 or more, those are $13.25. And that you can get your piece of the yellow brick road. Last week we talked about the Wizard of Oz and the whole bimetallic standards of money, how gold was represented by the yellow brick road and the silver slippers that were originally in the book but were ruby in the movie because it was a color movie. So if you want to get silver today, we have the 2018 Silver Eagles, a roll of those at $390. That's a good price. So you can get your silver slippers or your piece of the yellow brick road easily. Just call Wendy at 800-951-0592. She's hanging out there in Phoenix, manning the fort for us. And obviously, Jason and Brian are up on the Front Range. That's our outpost up in Colorado. And we're going to start this segment. Like I said before, the way I hook kids on teaching. I want to teach you guys about prepping today. So that's a modern topic. So what I'll do is I'm going to go back and we're going to look at a historical topic and then tie that in to the present day topic. Ramon, can we have the first clip, please?
The Depression hit this country all over. It hit the farm areas, it hit the cities. You were just there, out of work and out of food. And everybody was baffled. Nobody had ever had that experience before.
I had been saving for maybe 5-6 years a piggy bank, money in a piggy bank. Nickels, pennies, dimes the most. It turns out that I was the only one in the family that had any money. Because one day I came home and I grabbed hold of my piggy bank just to give it a shake, and there was nothing in it. My mother was looking at me, and she said, "Your father borrowed the money. He has to go out to look for work, and he needed money to go downtown." And he came home, and I didn't say anything, but my face was swollen with tears. My eyes were blinking with tears. And my father took me in his arms and he said, "I'm sorry. I had to have the money. But it's a loan. I'll pay it back to you." He never did. He never did.
My family had exhausted all its credit with the local merchants. And on one occasion, my father came home and asked what was for dinner that night, and my mother said, "There's nothing." How could that be? How could there be nothing? It was one of the few times in my life that I was fearful for myself.
Fearful of losing what little they had left, people rushed to the banks to withdraw their savings. But the banks, too, were short of cash. 1 year after the crash, 800 of them had failed. 9 million savings accounts were wiped out.
There was a janitor called George Gallies who had $1,000 in the Bank of the United States. It had taken Gallies 40 years to save $1,000. After spending 2 nights and 2 days in the pouring rain outside this shuttered, locked bank, literally beating on the walls with his hands in frustration, he realized he was never going to see 10 cents of his money. And he went back to the basement where he lived, and he hanged himself in despair. That's what bank failures did. They crushed tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of ordinary people like George Gallies.
Now, that's a very powerful clip. Can you imagine being that little girl and you come home and you shake your piggy bank and there's nothing in it because your parents needed the money, your dad needed to go downtown to find work, and he says, "It's just a loan, I'll pay you back." And did you hear her say, "He never did, he never did"? That's just sad. Or the guy that comes home, "Hey, what's for dinner?" "Well, there's nothing for dinner." "What do you mean there's nothing?" "There's nothing." And that's why we're going to talk about prepping today, to make sure that there is something there for dinner. And then the guy that has saved money for 40 years, and it's just a normal working class guy, and he goes to the bank to get his money, and the bank's locked, and he's not going to get it. And I can tell you, modern day, if you go to the bank and they've closed your bank on a Friday and they leave a little sign on the door that says, "Oh, go to FDIC.gov and get your money that way," you're not going to get your money for a while. It's going to be a mess. These clips come from The Century. It's an ABC News thing on the years of the United States. It's amazing. It's very well done. This one is 1929 to 1936. It's called Stormy Weather, and you'll hear the narrator. That's Peter Jennings. He actually does a very good job on this. The one thing they do leave out in here is the Gold Confiscation Act of 1933. That's why you come here, because you get that from us. Okay, what they leave out, we'll give you. Okay, Ramon, can you do the second clip, please?
Now meet Richard Colmer as Boston Blackie. Enemy to those who make him an enemy, friend to those who have no friend.
Many more were transfixed by the gripping dramas of radio. During the Depression, the radio was the one appliance people could not live without.
We used to watch the radio. It was like gathering around television. There was the shadow.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows.
Turn off the lights.
We're going to clean them out today.
You didn't know that they were standing on a stage reading from scripts. You just thought they were doing it.
All right, boys, let's hit out.
What I liked most was to go into my room and turn off all the lights. I didn't want any interference and just listen to it. My father thought I was a little weird, and he'd always come in and turn the lights on and say, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Nothing's wrong with me. This is really wonderful, a great way to listen to it."
But sooner or later, people had to turn the radio off. They had to leave the movie theater. And when they did, the Depression was still there, awaiting. It advanced upon the farmers of the South and Midwest in terrifying storms of dry dust. It was one of the worst droughts in American history. The land itself was blowing away.
And what they're referring to there is the Dust Bowl. Now, can you the diversion back during the Great Depression, if you just wanted to get away from the terrible economic conditions, you could go to the Nickelodeon, where you paid a nickel to get in, and you could listen to the orchestra. They would have cartoons. They have the newsreel. All these different. They had dance contests, and then you had your radio. And all these things were just great ways for a little bit of money that you could just get away from it all. But eventually you had to go back into reality, and that's where these clips are coming from. The reason we talk about radio, because this is the medium that we're talking to each other today, and we're communicating, whether it's podcast or the radio, and that's just a great way. Today we can actually do other things while we're listening to the radio. Back then people were transfixed in their living rooms looking at the radio and were just sucked in by it. It was just really an interesting thing. I guess people are sucked into TV now with their reality programs. So we're doing this because I want to talk to you about prepping. When the guy comes home from work and says, "What's for dinner?" and there's nothing there, you don't want to be in that position. Listening to this show already, you're already preparing financially. You are being your own central bank. You are buying that silver. You're buying that gold. I recommend that you buy that junk silver because it's great fractional material that you can barter if you have to. The same way with the smaller divisions of the gold. We ran those $5 Liberties last week. Those are great pieces to get, so you definitely want to get in on that. Check out the website, check out the special every day. But let's talk about prepping. Now, the first rule of prepping, this is a rhetorical question. What do you think the first rule of prepping is? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's also the first rule of Fight Club.
The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
Exactly. You do not talk about Fight Club. So if you're going to prep, now I know your neighbors, you're probably very good friends with them, and it's the Christian thing to do to share. But if you are prepping, and for some reason that there is a problem, as they say, if the fecal matter hits the rotary oscillator, you know what I'm talking about there. If something happens, you need to be prepared because it's too late to prepare once that happens. You need to prepare before that. It's just the proper thing to do. It's the Christian thing to share with your neighbor, obviously, but it's also the Christian thing to do to prepare and to protect your family from dangers that face you. So that's just one thing to think of. Okay, so now, have you ever watched Doomsday Preppers on, I think it was the Nat Geo channel? That they broke the first rule of Fight Club, because I can tell you, even though they tried to protect those people's identities, everybody knows who they are and can find them pretty easily. Somebody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows them. And so that's just not a smart thing to do, because you just advertised your entire program that you're running. That's pretty scary. Now, what do you prep for? Well, it all depends on your location, the threats around you, and how you're going to plan for that. I can think of a couple topics here, and I'll go into detail on those. What about weather, fire, EMP, a cessation or a denial of services? All those things can happen, and you need to be prepared for them. So think about, if you're in Phoenix, what are some of the things that can happen to you? Now, you heard about the Dust Bowl, and just the land blew away. You had that big windstorm that came through not long ago. That was called a derecho, I think they called it on the Weather Channel. It's a really weird name for it. Or you get those haboobs that come through, those big dust storms that come in and blanket everything. Do you need to prep for that? Those flash floods when you get rain out in the desert that can wipe out areas. You need to be careful about that. Okay. Folks that are up in Colorado, you have a whole lot of things that you need to prepare for. You've got the Yellowstone caldera that could blow at any time. You've got forest fires in the summer. You got severe winter and blizzards in the winter. So all things to think about, and just And like I live on the East Coast, hurricanes can hit here all the time. We have tornadoes that can come through. We have extreme heat. We have extreme cold sometimes. So it's just something to think about. Now let's talk about weather. If you have to get out of where you are, like if a hurricane's coming or the forest fire's coming, do you have an escape plan? Or do you shelter in place? Are you able to buckle down and stay at your house? Or can you harden your house? If let's say you're in Colorado and you're on the Front Range, have you prepared your property for forest fires? Have you gotten rid of brush that's in the area? Can you make a fire break? Is there any way you can get some sort of irrigation system that could maybe slow it down or wet your house down so that you can, hopefully the fire will jump your house? When I was in the Army, one of my first deployments was to Yellowstone National Park for the forest fires. And there was a group of farmers that came in with an irrigation system, and they put that all around the lodge there at Old Faithful, and they pumped water for 3 days. And that fire came down that hill, and it had a mind of its own. It melted the irrigation system. I couldn't believe it. It was really scary. When we had professional firefighters that took us around, and they told us, they said, when we get scared, you get scared. And at one point, I did see one of our professional firefighters that was with us got scared, and we had these fire shelters. And he's like, guys, we're getting close to getting these fire shelters because it was scary. The smoke was turning orange, and we were in a school bus driving down a road, and that was not fun. So that's one thing. We're talking about fire. In your house, do you have extinguishers in your house? I have one in every room in my house, along with a flashlight in all the kids' room, and everybody knows how to use them. Have you done fire drills? All right, well, we're at the halfway point. This is crazy how fast today's going. When we get back, we're going to still talk about prepping. Remember, 800-951-0592. Prepare for your financial future. Check out that special. We'll be back on the other side.
This is the Phyllis Schlafly Report from Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. Mrs. Schlafly was a courageous and articulate voice for traditional values and common sense for more than 70 years. Now, continuing that legacy, the president of Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, Ed Martin.
The $250 billion domestic gambling industry gained access to a new $150 billion market, thanks to the Supreme Court in May. The 6-3 decision by the court in Murphy v. NCAA opens the floodgates to sports gambling, while naively inviting Congress to clean up the mess that the court just created. Gambling wrecks families with a vengeance. The suicide rate among gamblers is higher than for any other addiction, and estimates are that a wagering habit pulls down 10 people associated with the addict. A family can lose its entire savings in one gambling binge, and many do. Gambling also corrupts our political system more than other addictions, as casino owners toss donations to candidates who then return the favor in spades after their election. Gambling afflicts the poor more than the rich, and the uneducated more than college graduates. Minorities and youth are particularly exploited by gambling. Congress and most states have repeatedly expressed strong public policy arguments against gambling, which was illegal nationwide at the turn of the 20th century, but expanded during the Great Depression. Today, 60% of Americans are sports fans, most of whom rearrange their schedules to watch their favorite teams. Until now, it has generally been illegal to target these sports fans with solicitations to bet on those games. But the court dealt the gambling industry a royal flush when they held that Congress was wrong, the Trump administration was wrong, and conservative groups, including Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, were wrong in urging the court to uphold the federal law against sports gambling. Justice Sam Alito wrote the decision that struck down an act of Congress, the Professional Amateur Sports Protection Act, which has worked well for 26 years in limiting sports gambling. This ruling illustrates that when the court makes headlines, it is almost never in a good way. As a result of this ruling, the task of defending against the scourge of sports gambling falls on state legislatures and the Department of Justice. Families will need to be more vigilant to keep their sports fan children from getting pulled into the dark underworld of gambling that will destroy their lives.
This has been the Phyllis Schlafly Report from Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. Can activist judges be stopped, or will they continue to overturn laws with no regard for the Constitution or the will of the people? Connect with us at phyllisschlafly.com to hear alerts on rulings made by never-elected supremacist judges and to share your viewpoint. That's phyllisschlafly.com. Thanks for listening, and join us again for the Phyllis Schlafly Report.
And Ramon's bringing us back in with Enter Sandman. That's another one of those great songs that I let out to at the gym. That's, I told you last week that one bump song I can get 10 push-ups extra out of. This one I can get at least 15 or 20. That's just a rocking song. The louder, the better. Okay, so when we were coming out of the break, we were talking about prepping. And like I said, if you're listening to this radio show, you are preparing financially for what may come down the road. It's going to come down the road at some point with the debt that we have. There's no doubt about that. You're hedging against inflation. You're buying precious metals. There's no doubt about that. You're being your own central banker, and that's great. But you need to step it up a little bit to prep. And this is for your family when it gets right down to it. You don't want your family to suffer. And once again, it's tailored to your individual location and the threats that face you. And you need to figure out, maybe order priority. Well, what's the most imminent threat that could happen to me? Or there are multiple threats, and we need to kind of prepare. But a lot of these preps are good for all those, okay? So we were talking about fire. So definitely have extinguishers in your house. In each room, make sure everybody knows where they are and they know how to use them. Just start a little fire out back and use one and show them how to do it. You want the ABC type fire extinguishers. They work on lots of different fires, so you definitely want one of them. Do fire drills. Have a plan. Have a designated location outside of your house where everybody meets, so you know where to meet. And if you're in Colorado, or if you're even out there in Phoenix, if you have forest fires near you, prep your yard. Be ready for this just in case. Okay, and make it easy on yourself, so that you do as many things as you can proactively to mitigate a lot of the threats around you. EMP, we talked about last week, the new Red Dawn movie, how an EMP hit. That's a scary thing. A lot of the electronics we have today are hardened somewhat, and there's a lot of misinformation about EMP. I think a lot of stuff might survive an EMP, but you also want to kind of prepare for that too. You can make things like what's called a Faraday box. You can do that very simply with a steel trash can and put a rubber liner in the bottom of it. You could put electronics in that to protect them. Even small ammo cans might even work as well, but that kind of protects. You can have backup radios, backup phones. You want to have extra batteries, solar generators. I have one of those in my truck on my dash just for charging up my phone if I have to, which are really nice. If you have generators, like standalone generators, portable generators, you can also get those hardwired to your house. There's companies that put those in, so if your electric goes out within 5 seconds, it starts up and runs. Some of those run on propane. There's also the portable generators you can buy at your home supply stores. There are also boxes that you can get to your house that you can put next to your electric box. So you can run maybe 5 extra circuits by plugging your generator directly into that box and shutting down the other box. If you have those generators, you need to make sure you use ethanol-free fuel in those small engines, and you need to put a fuel stabilizer. You need to run them every month to make sure that they work, to cycle that gasoline through, and you definitely want to be there. What about cessation or denial of services? What if the electric goes out, and let's say we have a cashless society? Well, guess what? Those debit cards and credit cards aren't going to work. You need to have a backup plan of how you're going to pay for things. You can barter. You can use that junk silver we were talking about, especially the smaller denominations. I was just looking at the melt value today for mercury diamond. It's $1.10, and a silver quarter is $2.85. That's a gallon of gas in the real world, a loaf of bread in the real world. Not a good loaf of bread, I might add. My wife told me last week when I mentioned this on the radio that you could buy a loaf of bread for $1. She goes, "You can't buy a loaf of bread for $1." I'm like, "I'm pretty sure you can." And my daughter and I went shopping last night. We found a loaf of bread for $1. It's probably not the most nutritious bread, but it's bread nonetheless. I was right. But the bread we get, I think it's like $2.38 a loaf. It's expensive, but I never even checked the price till last night. That's the brand we get. I always get it. Never even looked at the price, but now I know. But I probably didn't want to know. Anyway, but what if the banks are down? What if you can't go to Walmart now and use a debit card? Okay, what are you going to do? You can barter, and if the person that's on the other end of that transaction wants to accept that, it's probably going to be a pretty good thing to have, that junk silver. I think that's a good thing to do. If you're going to do bartering, if you ever, there was a CBS show called Jericho. This was 4 or 5 years ago. What a great show! But if you look at what happened there, you had the 20 nukes that went off in the United States, and it was just a total wipeout. And you had the EMP that hit, and then you had town versus town going after each other, and then you had the whole breakdown. people were bartering things. That was just a scary show. I can't believe that CBS even ran that show to begin with, because it was like pro-gun, pro-America, that kind of thing. It was shocking that they had that on. It only lasted a year and a half, but it was really good. Go back and watch that. It's excellent. Okay, now prepping your car. Now, I was just checking I have an older Suburban, and that thing, I have to make sure all kinds of stuff's in that thing, because I never know if it might break down. But you want to have at minimum a first aid kit in there. I have my solar charger, some flares. You want some matches, a blanket possibly if it's cold. Have a couple water bottles in there, maybe an air pump, tow strap. Okay, have a go bag. We're going to talk about that in a second, and then jumper cables. So there's just things you need to have. If you were equipping your kid's car, you'd want all that stuff in there for your kid in case they broke down. Plus, maybe access to AAA if the world's still working right. Okay. If you have to evacuate, you want to plan on multiple routes, because if you have to get out of Dodge quickly, everybody else is going to be getting out of Dodge. And so some of those main roads are going to be congested, and you need to think about maybe alternate routes that you can get through, and have a planned location that you're going to. Maybe Aunt Betsy that lives 2 states over, and just make sure Aunt Betsy knows you're on your way. And make sure you have enough gas in your car. But I've read prep sites that say you should have at least 3/4 tank of gas in your car all the time. That's hard to do, but I don't know if you run it down to the last second until the light comes on. But you should definitely have enough gas in your car to get where you need to go. All right, now let's talk about go bags. Now, everyone in your family needs one of these. This could be just a knapsack, a little backpack. Make sure it's a comfortable one. And I'm going to go down this list, and I'll have it available for Joe if you want to get it from him. I'll put it up in a nice Word document and have it sent out to you. Okay, so in your backpack, minimum, okay, first aid kit, a couple bottles of water, some emergency food, maybe some granola bars, something that's high protein, high energy, some matches, maybe a space blanket, a portable saw or knife or a machete, some flares, batteries, phone charger, okay, portable radio, some wipes, toilet paper, that's always key to have, some large gallon baggies so you can store things in there so they won't get wet, a whistle, a mirror, one of those air horns, some parachute cord, that 550 cord. You can find it at the local department stores. It's really super strong. A poncho possibly. Okay, so you're certainly not, now you can get this down to about 20 or 25 pounds if you pack it right, and you need to practice carrying this thing. Go for a walk with your go bag. Okay. Now, your kids, you're not going to have them carrying the same amount you're carrying, but tailor that go bag to what your kids need and make sure they have it and have it ready to go. It's like the Minuteman. It's ready at a moment's notice. It needs to be there. You might even want to have a change of clothes or some shirts and underwear in there, and just good to have. Now, if you're going to be bugging out, and let's say you're going to take firearms, okay, now this is a touchy subject. I'm not going to tell you which brand of firearm you should have. That's personal. I'm just telling you, though, the standard guns that are out there in survival situations, ones that we'll pick this up on the other side. Prepping Monday, interesting stuff. Back on the other side, 800-951-0592. You always need to prepare. And that song bringing us back in is For Honor. It's a metal band that does gaming music. It's really neat music. We were on the other side of the break. We were talking about if possible, if you have to bug out, and firearms are going to be in the equation. Some people are not comfortable with firearms. Some people are very comfortable with firearms. That's a whole other show I could do on that one. We touched on it last week with the Second Amendment. But I'm just going to tell you just some standard firearms that if you're going to take firearms, and the brands I'm going to tell you, I'm not recommending them. I'm just saying these are just standard things that you would find out there that are standard guns. Okay, so a Remington 870, standard shotgun, Mossberg 500, standard shotgun. Millions of these have been produced. There's plenty of them out there. A lot of availability for spare parts. A Ruger 1022, a great little 22 rifle, and then there's a new gun out now called a Smith & Wesson M&P 1522. If you're used to an AR, it's the same muscle memory on this, and it's a 22 rifle, so they're very light, and you can carry a lot of ammunition with you on that. The 870 and the Mossberg 500, I would recommend 12 gauge on that because that's more readily available ammunition. So that's firearms. I know that's touchy, and that's up to you whether you're going to have firearms. If It's just a decision you have to make, and I'd be glad to do a whole other show on that with Joe if he'll let me. That's fine. Okay, let's talk about food prepping. Now, I did it all wrong when I first started prepping. I went out and bought like 40 cans of the great big tall Chef Boyardee beefaroni cans and brought them back to my house and threw them in the garage. And I got the generic pears in a can and the fruit salad stuff, the fruit mix. And I was like, all right, we're good. And my kid said, I'm not eating that beefaroni. I'm like, well, don't eat for 2 days and you'll be begging me for it. Well, that's just the wrong thing. You don't want to do that to your kids. You want as much stability as possible. So then I figured it out. We ended up donating all that stuff to a food pantry, and so it was a great thing to do there. But there's a thing called copy canning, and I want to read this to you. It's really good, copy canning. Okay, it's simply modifying one small aspect of your shopping and changing one small portion of your food storage habits. The change while made shopping is simple. When you buy an item you plan on using that week, simply purchase 2 of them. The alternative change for storage is to find another place to stock food other than where you're storing it now and put that extra item there. Let's break it down with how and why. Let's say you're planning on buying a can of green beans. Instead of buying 1 can, pick up 2. It's that simple. When you get home and start putting everything away, take the second can and store it somewhere else. Also, get a black magic marker and write the month and year you got it, just so you know. Okay, use the can, you put it in your regular storage space, and then the next time you need a can of green beans, put it on the shopping list like you normally would, being sure not to use the second can you purchased unless there's an emergency. Now, the next time you go shopping and need to replace the can of green beans, buy 2 of them. When you get home, take both cans to your alternate spot and remove the first can stored there and put in your pantry. This is called rotation. This keeps your oldest items in the front to be used first. Repeat this with the green beans until you're sure you have enough to last you 30 days. Then do it with something else that you eat regularly. Every time you go shopping, you'll be increasing your stored items by 1. Do this with a few items every shopping trip, and within a very short time, you will establish a stockpile of extra food without breaking the bank or like you're overspending to do it. Okay? So to recap, buy what you normally would. There's no reason to purchase something you won't eat, like that beefaroni. When you would normally purchase 1, buy 2. Keep in mind this works best on canned and boxed items. Buying 2 gallons of milk rarely works out with this method, obviously. Store the extra purchased items somewhere other than where you normally put your canned or boxed foods. This can be under a bed, in a closet, under a couch, some other place you don't normally store food. You do this to keep it separate in your mind. If the spot where you keep your green beans has 2 cans, you'll just use them both and then go buy another can. If the spot is empty after using 1 can, you are mentally prepared to have to go buy another can to replace it. When replacing the used item, again, buy an additional 1, that means 2 total, and the newly purchased items to the alternate storage place and put them there. Then move the oldest item to the normal food storage place, and this establishes a rotation routine to keep your oldest food in place to be used soonest, making your food system more efficient. So that's called copy canning, and that's a great way to get your prep started. And you just do it gradually. And when you get to the point where you think you have enough for 30 days or 60 days or however long you think you're going to need, then you stop and you pick another item, peanut butter or spaghetti sauce or, dried beans. And that's just a great way to do that. That's your food. Now, water. Water is very important. I would suggest getting some sort of water filter. So if you have to bug out and you have access to a water source, you can at least filter it. Okay. And some people disagree on this, but I would plan for 5 gallons of water per person per day. Now, if you can capture rainwater at your house, that's a great thing to do. Some states have outlawed this, believe it or not. Welcome to the land of the free, home of the brave. They've banned capturing rainwater. Unbelievable. Okay, you can also take water bottles and freeze them and put them up in your freezer to fill up space. That way, if you lose electric, that frozen water bottle will help keep that ice pack up in your freezer to be more efficient, okay? And so you can buy cases of water. You can buy the big 5-gallon jugs and store water. Once again, you're going to have to rotate that. I live in a hurricane area, so when a hurricane comes, the stores are wiped out. They say a food riot is 6 missed meals away. So you don't want to have to go to your local grocery store or big box store and try to get food the day before a hurricane. It's not going to happen. Same way with the snowstorm. All the toilet paper and bread is gone. Okay. In this case, we had a hurricane here a few years ago, and you couldn't find a generator around here. You couldn't find cases of water at all. I had 30 cases of water stacked in my garage. When my wife drove her car in and tried to open the door, she would hit them with her car door, and I could hear her just cuss me all the time because there was so much water in our garage. We eventually worked through it. I have a different way to do it now. I have storable water. It's much more efficient that way. Also, with the water filter, if you have a water source near you, we have a stream that runs through our development, and I could easily go there and collect water, and then you run it through the filter, and you're good. But you want to have the food and the water are very important. The shelter is also very important. Having that go bag is very important. You definitely want to be prepared in case you have an emergency. When the emergency hits, it's too late. That's your prep then is non-existent. Now, you also have to understand, you can do all this prepping, and you can be ready, and you could have an earthquake that wipes everything out. So understand that your prep is only as good as Mother Nature allows you to have it. So if a hurricane came through here and wiped everything out, I wouldn't have anything. But if it's not that bad, I can go 2 weeks with the electric out. I can go 2 weeks without food or water. We're going to make it. And in America, we would hope that everything gets back to normal in a couple weeks. Puerto Rico is still not rebounded from what hit. They had a double whammy down there. They are still in bad shape. And did you see that the president of Puerto Rico, using government funds, was over at the World Cup? I think he spent $26,000. That's not going over too well with the people of Puerto Rico. I think they're having a problem with that. All right, so we're coming up on the final segment, 800-951-0592. We've got the Silver Slipper and Yellow Brick Road special today. We've got the Liberties or St. Gaudens at $13.30, 10 or more $13.25, and the Silver Eagles at $3.90 a roll. And we're back into the final segment with Dire Straits. I want my MTV. That's money for nothing. Well, guess what? Zimbabwe is money for nothing. You just add zeros to the dollars. So now if you don't have electric, you're not going to be able to get your MTV. Not that there's any music on MTV anymore. It's all reality shows. But just going to hit our special again, $20 Liberties or St. Gaudens, $13.30 each, or 10 or more for $13.25. We also have the rolls of Silver Eagles for $390. So you can get your part of the Yellow Brick Road and your part of the Silver Slippers, and take advantage of that. Prices for metals are low right now. The premiums are low, so we're trying to pass this on to you, and we just want you to be able to get in on this. Also remember that fractional material is great stuff to have if you're going to get into a barter situation. Okay, on our website, remember, we have the ABC News special about stormy weather, the Great Depression. Watch that. It's really, really good. ABC did a great job on that. You could disagree with Peter Jennings' political philosophy all you want, but he does a good job. He's pretty fair doing this Century series, and I like it. And those two clips came from that today. The markets, nothing really's changed on the markets. The Shanghai's down 17, the Nasdaq's down 8, S&P's down less than $1, not a big deal. Oil's still down at $2.87 for 68.14 a barrel. The Saudis are hating that. They like oil at $80 so they can live like kings. Gold down about $2.30 at $1238.90. Silver still at $15.80. So silver is cheap right now. Silver is definitely a buying opportunity. Okay, I have absolutely loved doing the show for the past 4 days. I'm actually sad that tomorrow's my last day. I want to come back and be with this audience. I'm a partner at Patriot. I love it. I believe in Joe and Eric. They are great guys. The mission, and also Jason and Brian up in Colorado, those guys are true Patriots as well. Remember Shoutcast.com and go search for American Freedom Network to listen to their show. Those guys are doing a great job. Now, tomorrow's show, Jason's going to be on with me in the second segment. We're going to talk Andrew Jackson. He's one of our favorite guys. Now, he's very controversial, no doubt about that. We'll give you both sides of him tomorrow because that's only fair. That's what a good history teacher should do, give you both sides. Okay, so we're going to give that to you tomorrow, and I'm going to try to catch up on everything that I haven't been able to cover. Now, if you want me back, you need to let Joe know. You need to email him at doublej@allamericangold.com, doublej@allamericangold.com. If you want me to come back, I'll be glad to. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've got to tell you, doing this radio show is harder than teaching. It really is. I've spent 6 hours a day preparing for this show. I hope it shows up in the show, but this is tough, and I haven't gotten to half the stuff every day that I've had planned. And I tell you, I couldn't have done this without Ramon. Ramon, if you ever watch Stripes, remember how Bill Murray said Sergeant Huck is our big toe? Well, Ramon is the big toe of the show. He keeps us walking straight. And Ramon, thank you so much. You have been such a big help to me. Now, Joe will be back on Wednesday. We're going to hear all about his great vacation stories. We hope we hear about whitewater rafting, about parachuting off the bridge, or bungee jumping, or all the cool stuff that he did. His golf game, he's jumping back into the mix on Wednesday. We hope he's enjoyed his time off. Eric's birthday was last week. We've had a lot of things going on, a lot of history that I've been wanting to put forth to you guys, and hopefully I can come back and do that again. Well, we're out of time for today. Great Monday. Hope you had a payday today. And I'll prepare this document for you so you can have all this prep information. And we'll see you tomorrow. Andrew Jackson's tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Happy Monday.